This is what the back of the van currently looks like, and I'm not happy with the way this is looking. There's no trim, and none of the wood matches. I think it doesn't quite look the way I want it to. So I'm going to change that in today's video. The first step of that is to fix the bottom of the door. The jamb basically doesn't come all the way forward on that bottom portion there, the tread. So I cut a 2x2 to length, trimmed it down a little bit so it would go flush, and then just screwed straight through the face into the existing framing. So now the jamb is all equal on each side. The next step was to cut a piece of vertical trim to go on the side where the door and window open. Then I realized that I also needed to take off the hardware for the lock and attach that. So I did that nice and simple. Then I cut a second board to match the same thickness to go on the other side. For the top of the trim, I cut a few boards with curved edges like I did on the inside. I really like this look, so I'm going to use it on the outside as well. I've decided to take a break from doing the trim just for a moment because I decided that I really want to paint this back. I've kind of gotten a little bit of an oppressed feeling from all the wood, and I know that might sound a little bit strange. I love the way that it looks kind of like a cabin, but I want to make this feel a little bit brighter. So I'm actually going to be painting this yellow. So before I put on the trim, rather than try and mask around the trim, I'm going to start the paint job. The wood that I'm using for my trim came out of the old build, so it's full of screw holes, and so is the cladding that's on the side of the wall, basically. That's not good for trim, but because we're going to be painting it, I can fill all those holes with wood filler, go back on top after it's dried, and paint it. I set the trim aside for a moment to focus on the wall, and the first part of that I actually painted was the door jamb. I removed the weather stripping and then just painted it blue to match the door. This is the color paint that I chose. I think it's really awesome, and I started by doing the left-hand side. The plywood that was ugly on the side took the paint really well. The cladding, not so much. This is just one coat here of paint, so it'll take a couple coats to get that fully done. The reason why the door is actually open like this is because the paint on the door jamb is still drying. So I was only able to do one side of this yellow to begin with. Once the door jamb dried, though, I was able to do the other side. That side's a lot bigger, and this is what it looks like with 3 coats of paint put on. It's a really, really bright color. I think it looks good. I used a white spray primer for the trim, and then I went ahead and painted it blue. Then I had to reassemble it, starting with the same piece of trim that I started with. And this one I had to screw straight through the face in order to get the right grip that I needed. So that's a little bit ugly, and I'll have to deal with that when it comes to that. Then I jumped over to the other side and finally placed the 2 pieces on the top. At this point I realized that I'd actually not finished making all the trim, so I cut the final pieces to finish off the window and then primed and painted them as well. I added a spacer next to the window so that I'd have something to nail the trim into. I then went ahead and did that. Some of the trim sustained some pretty heavy damage, plus there's a lot of screw holes, so I used some wood filler to fill that in. I want to turn this cubby, which came with the van, into a flower box to go in the window. So I added a backing to it, or really I guess a bottom. Then I took 2 L brackets, primed them, and then I painted them blue to match. Once I'd done that, I realized that I needed to notch out a little bit of the box so that they would sit flush. Then I mounted those L brackets onto the siding underneath the window. Then I was able to basically place the planter on top of the L brackets and screw up into them. That way you're hiding the L bracket sort of behind the planter. I think it's a really cool look. Here you can see a major problem. Basically, my door doesn't go low enough to meet my door jamb. So I took a 2x2 and I cut it down so that it would fit. It's not exactly equal on both sides, but I need to fill that space. Then I primed and painted that. Then I had to take that whole bottom portion of the Dutch door off, and I screwed this bottom strip straight into the bottom. You'll never see those screws because they're underneath, and remounted the door. Now it works, and it works on the first try, and that is pretty good. I was raised Jewish, and since this is my first real home, I decided to hang a mezuzah on the door frame. Well, as you can see, I've made a huge improvement to the outside of the van. This is the part that looks like a home, and that's really important to me. Even though I haven't technically improved anything functional in this video, I have made this feel so much more like a home. Before, when I opened this roll-up door, it felt unfinished, it felt a little bit depressing. I knew that I needed to do trim, but just the wood, it was so heavy. And I never really wanted to open the door. I never felt like I wanted to, expose, sort of, I guess, this part of the build. Now, I want to have this door up all the time. This looks amazing. I love, love, love this color. The color of this paint, by the way, is called I Want a Boogie, and it doesn't get any better than that. Buying this yellow paint was just a spur-of-the-moment decision that I made while I was picking up some more of the blue that I've used throughout the van because I needed to paint the trim. And I think it's one of the best decisions that I've made so far. It's bright, it's happy, I love it, it's great, I can't stop looking at it. So I think this has been a hell of a success. There was something functional that I added that I just escaped my mind. The bottom part of the door where there was that big 1.5 inch gap, that was causing a lot of breeze, and I'd shoved a towel underneath there and just sort of left it there, but that's not a great solution. So now hopefully I shouldn't have that breeze coming in, that cold air during the night, hot air during the day. That was a real problem for me. That door was too short because of the issues that I had when I trimmed it down. I mismeasured when I completely messed up with the framing of this wall. So that's an issue that's been part of this build for a long time. A bit of an experiment is this pothos vine. This has been with me for a couple of years now as I moved from room to room, house to house kind of thing, renting. And I didn't really want to give it up. I wanted to try and have plants in my space, even though I have whatever the opposite of a green thumb is. I tend to kill cacti. But this I haven't killed, so I would like to continue that streak. And I realize that this is not the best way to not kill a plant. It's probably a good way to do that. I imagine it's going to have a hard time with all the driving and jostling, and it might make a few escape attempts. But it's looking pretty good, and we'll see how it goes. Well, my dad's cat, Freya, approves, so that's good enough for me. I'll see you in the next one. Cheers.